The blood-curdling scream pierced the silent Montana night like a knife, echoing across the rolling plains surrounding the small frontier town of Helena. Jenna Zimmerman clutched the edges of her bed, sweat pouring down her face as another contraction tore through her body. The year was 1876, and she was alone in her modest homestead, her husband Marcus nowhere to be found. "Marcus!" she cried out, though she knew it was futile. He had stormed out hours earlier after another bitter argument, taking his horse and riding toward town. The baby wasn't supposed to come for another week, but the tiny life inside her had other plans. Jenna's breath came in ragged gasps as she tried to rise from the bed. At 22, she had never felt more terrified. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the doctor in town might as well have been on the moon for all the good it did her now. Rain lashed against the windows of the small cabin, the spring storm having appeared suddenly like the labor pains that now consumed her. She had barely managed to light the oil lamp when another contraction doubled her over, forcing a guttural moan from her throat. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the terrible truth: she would have to deliver this baby alone. A sudden pounding at the door startled her. Through clenched teeth she called out, "Who's there?" "Name's Yates Everett, madam. Passing through and saw your light. Storm's getting worse. Might I trouble you for shelter?" Under normal circumstances, Jenna would never consider letting a stranger into her home, especially with Marcus gone. But these were far from normal circumstances. "Please," she gasped. "Help me." The door swung open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted by a flash of lightning. He stepped inside, water dripping from his duster and wide-brimmed hat. In the lamplight, Jenna could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with kind eyes that widened in shock when he took in her condition. "Madam, you're—" He removed his hat quickly, revealing sandy brown hair. Another contraction hit, and Jenna cried out, clutching her swollen belly. "The baby's coming," she managed through gritted teeth. "My husband's gone." The stranger Yates hesitated only a moment before springing into action. He shrugged off his wet duster, revealing the practical attire of a working cowboy. "I worked a cattle drive with a doc once," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Helped birth calves and even a foal or two. It ain't the same, but I reckon the principles aren't too different." He moved with surprising efficiency, stoking the dying fire in the hearth and putting water to boil. His calm demeanor somehow eased Jenna's panic, though the pain remained undiminished. "My husband," she gasped between contractions. "He left. We argued and he just left." Yates's expression darkened briefly. "Don't you worry about him now, Mrs. Zimmerman. Jenna Zimmerman, Mrs. Zimmerman. I'm going to help you through this. That little one's not waiting for anyone, least of all a man who'd leave his wife in your condition." The next hours passed in a blur of pain, sweat, and encouragement from the stranger who'd appeared like an angel out of the storm. Yates spoke in a steady voice, guiding her through each contraction, wiping her brow, and offering strength when hers faltered. "I can see the head," he announced finally, his voice filled with wonder. "One more push, Mrs. Zimmerman. You can do this." With a cry that seemed to tear from her very soul, Jenna gave a final push. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, followed by the most beautiful sound she had ever heard: the wailing cry of her newborn child. "It's a boy," Yates said, his voice thick with emotion. He wrapped the infant in a clean cloth and placed him in Jenna's arms. A strong, healthy boy. Tears flowed freely down Jenna's cheeks as she gazed into the tiny, red face of her son. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mama." While Jenna bonded with her son, Yates cleaned up with quiet efficiency, giving mother and child space while remaining close enough to help if needed. Outside, the storm gradually subsided, leaving an unnatural stillness in its wake. "Thank you," Jenna said finally, looking up to meet the cowboy's gaze. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Yates shook his head. "Just happened to be in the right place. Any decent man would have done the same." "Where were you headed before the storm hit?" she asked, suddenly realizing she knew nothing about the man who had just delivered her child. "Nowhere in particular," he replied, pouring himself a cup of coffee he'd brewed. "I was working a ranch down near Butte, but the owner sold out. Been drifting since, looking for work." Dawn was breaking by the time Jenna had recovered enough to feed her son and rest. Yates had made himself useful, tending to her horse in the small stable and repairing a leak in the roof that the storm had worsened. He moved with the confident ease of a man accustomed to hard work and solving problems. "You should rest," he said, returning from his chores. "I'll keep watch for your husband's return." At the mention of Marcus, Jenna's face clouded. "He might not come back," she admitted quietly. "Things haven't been right between us for months. He didn't want the baby." Yates's expression remained neutral, but his eyes flashed with something anger, perhaps, or indignation on her behalf. A man who'd abandon his wife at such a time. He trailed off, shaking his head. "The homestead was my idea," Jenna continued, finding it strangely easy to confide in this stranger. "I grew up in Boston, but I always dreamed of the West. Marcus and I met there. He was charming, full of big plans. When I inherited some money from my aunt, he suggested we try our fortune out here. And it hasn't worked out the way you hoped. The land is harder than we expected. The winters are brutal, and Marcus—" She looked down at her sleeping son. "He wasn't prepared for the work, the isolation. He spends more time in town than here lately. Gambling, drinking." Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The West breaks some men, builds others up." "Which did it do to you, Mr. Everett?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Still working that out, madam. 3 days passed with no sign of Marcus." Yates remained at the homestead, insisting he couldn't in good conscience leave a new mother and infant alone. Each day, he checked the horizon for approaching riders, but each night he would simply say, "No sign of him yet," and continue with whatever task he'd set for himself. And there were many tasks. Yates repaired the chicken coop that had been listing dangerously to one side. He chopped enough firewood to last weeks. He even managed to coax better production from Jenna's struggling vegetable garden, revealing a knowledge of growing things that surprised her. "My mother kept a garden," he explained when she commented on it. "Taught me which plants need what. Said a man should know how to feed himself proper, not just with meat and beans." On the 4th day, as they sat on the porch in the gentle evening light, the baby whom Jenna had named Samuel sleeping peacefully in a cradle Yates had fashioned from an old barrel, Jenna finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why are you still here, Mr. Everett?" Yates looked out over the land, his profile strong against the setting sun. "Told you, couldn't leave you alone. But it's been days. Surely you have places to be, work to find." He turned to face her, his eyes serious. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I've been drifting for 3 years now. Since the war ended and everything changed. One place is much like another to me, but here, I see someone who needs help, real help, not charity but a hand up." He gestured to the homestead. "This place has potential, good water, decent soil, it just needs work and care." "You sound like you know something about farming." "My family had a place in Missouri before the war, nothing fancy, but it was ours." A shadow passed over his features. "Lost it all. Parents died of fever. Brother didn't come back from Shiloh. After that, didn't seem much point in staying put." Jenna studied him, seeing for the first time the depth of loss behind his capable demeanor. "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "Life goes on, has to." His gaze drifted to little Samuel. New life comes along, reminds us what matters. A week passed and still no Marcus. Yates took to riding into town for supplies, bringing back not only necessities but also news. The bartender at the saloon reported that Marcus Zimmerman had been on a losing streak, had gotten into an argument with some professional gamblers, and had last been seen boarding an eastbound stage, declaring he was done with this God-forsaken territory. Jenna received the news with a strange calm. Perhaps she had known, deep down, that Marcus wouldn't return. The man who had charmed her in Boston drawing rooms had revealed himself to be weak and selfish when faced with the realities of frontier life. The birth of their son had simply been the final straw. "I should be heartbroken," she confessed to Yates that evening as they shared a simple supper. "He's my husband, Samuel's father, but all I feel is relief." Yates considered her words carefully. "Sometimes a burden lifting feels like that. Relief before the hurt comes." But the hurt didn't come. Instead, each day brought new rhythms as Jenna recovered her strength and learned to care for her son with Yates's unexpected but welcome support. He showed a natural ease with the baby, cradling Samuel with large, gentle hands that seemed at odds with his weathered appearance. "You're good with him," Jenna observed one evening as Yates paced the floor with a fussy Samuel, humming a tune she didn't recognize. "Babies know when you're afraid of them," he replied with a small smile. "I just let him know I ain't scared." As the days turned to weeks, the boundaries between them gradually shifted. Yates began sleeping in the small lean-to attached to the cabin rather than the barn. Jenna found herself watching for his return when he went to check the fence line or hunt for their dinner. Their conversations stretched into the night, covering everything from his adventures on cattle drives to her childhood in Boston. "I never quite fit there," she admitted. "Always had my nose in books about the West, dreaming of open skies and freedom." "And now that you're here," Yates asked, "is it what you dreamed?" Jenna looked around the modest cabin that had begun to feel more like a home since Yates's arrival. "It's harder, lonelier sometimes. But yes, there's a freedom here I never found back east, a chance to build something that's truly mine." "Your husband didn't see it that way," she shook her head. "Marcus wanted quick success. He thought we'd establish the homestead, sell it for a profit, and move on to something easier. When the work proved harder than expected, he lost interest." "His loss," Yates said simply, and the look in his eyes made Jenna's heart beat a little faster. A month after Samuel's birth, Jenna rode into town with Yates and the baby to register the birth and handle some business at the land office. The trip revealed another side to their evolving relationship, the way others perceived them. The clerk at the general store automatically assumed Yates was her husband. The preacher's wife cooed over Samuel and complimented the new family. Neither of them corrected these assumptions. On the ride back, the summer sun warm on their faces, Jenna broke the comfortable silence. "People think we're married." Yates kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Does that bother you? I am married, legally at least." She adjusted Samuel in her arms, though apparently abandoned. "There are ways to address that, legal ways if enough time passes." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. That night, after Samuel was asleep, they sat before the fire, closer than they had before. Jenna was acutely aware of Yates beside her, of the strength in his frame and the gentleness in his hands. "I should move on," he said suddenly, though he made no move to rise. "People will talk. Your reputation, my reputation." Jenna laughed softly. "Mr. Everett, I'm a woman alone on a homestead with a newborn child and a husband who ran off. My reputation is already decided by those who care about such things." "Still," he insisted, "there are proprieties." Jenna turned to face him fully. Yates, she said, using his given name for the first time. Where would you go? He met her gaze, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. Don't rightly know. Another ranch, maybe, or north to the Montana Territory. Heard there's work there. What if you stayed? The words came out before she could reconsider. Not in the lean-to, not as some hired hand, but as a partner in this place. Yates went very still. What exactly are you proposing, Mrs. Zimmerman? I'm proposing that life is too short and too hard out here to deny what's right in front of us. She took a deep breath. You delivered my son. You stayed when my husband ran. You've done more for this homestead in a month than Marcus did in a year. That doesn't mean I know what it means, she interrupted. It means you're a good man, Yates Everett, a man of your word, a man who faces challenges instead of running from them. She reached out tentatively and placed her hand over his. And I think we could build something here. Together. The silence stretched between them, filled with the crackle of the fire and the distant call of a night bird. Then, slowly, Yates turned his hand over and entwined his fingers with hers. I ain't a man for temporary things, Jenna, he said, his voice rough with emotion. If I stay, it's for good. And someday, when the law allows, I'd want to make it proper. For you, for Samuel, for all of us. Jenna felt tears prick her eyes. That's what I want too. He reached up with his free hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the night air. May I kiss you, Jenna Zimmerman? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers with gentle restraint that quickly gave way to deeper feeling. When they finally parted, both were breathing harder, and something fundamental had shifted between them. I should check on Samuel, Jenna said, her voice unsteady. Yates nodded, releasing her hand reluctantly. I'll bank the fire. That night, Yates still slept in the lean-to, but both knew it was the last night they would spend apart. The following months brought changes to the homestead and to their relationship. Yates moved his few possessions into the cabin, and they established new routines as a family. They were careful to maintain appearances in town. Jenna still wore her wedding ring, and they never openly contradicted the assumption that Yates was a hired hand or distant relation helping the abandoned Mrs. Zimmerman. But on the homestead, they lived increasingly as husband and wife in all but name. Yates proved to be not only hardworking but insightful about improvements to the property. He built an irrigation system that transformed their struggling crops, traded labor with neighboring homesteaders to acquire better livestock, and even constructed an addition to the cabin as Samuel grew and their family needed more space. You have a vision for this place, Jenna remarked one evening as they reviewed his sketched plans for a proper barn. We have a vision, he corrected gently. I'm just putting it on paper. In the evenings after Samuel was asleep, they would talk of their dreams for the future. Yates had a practical streak balanced by unexpected idealism. He wanted not just to survive but to build something lasting, something that could grow and sustain them and, someday, more children. I never thought I'd want a family again, he confessed one night, his head in Jenna's lap as she ran her fingers through his hair. After losing everyone, it seemed safer to keep moving, not to put down roots. And now, she asked. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. Now I can't imagine any other life but this one. Winter came to the Montana Territory with brutal force, but the homestead was prepared. The root cellar was stocked, the woodpile high, and the cabin snug against the howling winds. They spent the long evenings teaching each other what they knew. Jenna read aloud from her small collection of books, while Yates taught her to play chess, using pieces he'd carved during the autumn evenings. Samuel flourished under their combined care, growing from a newborn to a sturdy, curious baby who delighted in exploring the cabin on all fours. He had Jenna's eyes, and everyone agreed, Yates's smile, though no one spoke this observation aloud. "He thinks you're his father," Jenna said one evening, watching as Yates patiently built block towers for Samuel to enthusiastically destroy. "And in every way that matters, you are." The look Yates gave her was full of such love it nearly took her breath away. "I'd be proud to claim him as my son. When the time is right." The time they both anticipated was dictated by law and custom. Abandonment could be grounds for divorce in the territory, but only after a certain period had passed. They marked the days, building their life together while waiting for legal recognition of what their hearts already knew. Spring brought new beginnings. The land awakened, and with it came opportunities. A letter arrived from the land office, forwarded from the town lawyer, officially requesting information about Marcus Zimmerman's whereabouts in relation to the homestead claim. Jenna, with Yates's support, began the formal process of documenting abandonment. It could take another year, the lawyer warned when they made a rare joint visit to town, and there will be talk. "There's already talk," Jenna replied calmly. "We can weather it." As Samuel's first birthday approached, they planned a small celebration. Neighbors from surrounding homesteads were invited: the Millers, whose fence Yates had helped rebuild after a storm; the Johnsons, whose son Yates had taught to break horses; the Wilsons, whose daughter had become Jenna's closest friend in the territory. The day before the celebration, Yates rode into town for supplies and returned with unexpected news. "Marcus was spotted in Denver," he reported, his expression grave. "Apparently, he's been telling people he has a claim in Montana he's planning to sell." Jenna felt a chill despite the summer warmth. "He can't sell what he abandoned. Legally, no, but if he returns, it complicates things." Yates ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as frustration. "The abandonment claim isn't final yet." That night, after a subdued dinner, Jenna found Yates on the porch, staring out at the land they'd worked so hard to improve. The fields were thriving, the new barn stood solid against the evening sky, and wildflowers Jenna had planted bordered the path to the cabin. "I won't let him take this from us," she said firmly, joining him at the railing. Yates turned to her, his expression resolute. "No, we won't, but we need to be prepared. If he comes back, there could be trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The legal kind, for sure. But men like Marcus, when they're desperate, they can be dangerous." Jenna thought of her former husband, charming but weak, selfish but not violent. "He's never been a fighter. Men change out here, sometimes not for the better." Yates took her hand. "I promise you this, Jenna. Whatever happens, I'll protect you and Samuel. This is our home now, and I aim to keep it that way." Samuel's birthday celebration went ahead as planned, a joyful gathering that strengthened their ties to the community. The neighbors brought small gifts, and dish after dish of home-cooked food. Samuel, dressed in a new outfit Jenna had sewn, was the center of attention, charming everyone with his recent attempts at walking and his infectious laugh. Throughout the day, Jenna noticed the way the other women watched her with Yates, the easy partnership they had developed, the natural way they moved around each other, anticipating needs before they were spoken. Martha Wilson pulled her aside as the guests were preparing to leave. "You found a good man there," Martha said quietly, nodding toward Yates, who was showing Samuel how to pet a new kitten one of the neighbors had brought as a gift. "Better than the first, from what I've heard." Jenna felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "We're not. That is, legally." Martha waved away her protests. "Law's one thing, what's right is another. That man loves you and that boy like they're his own breath. Anyone with eyes can see it." As summer turned to autumn, they worked to prepare for another winter, their second together. The homestead had prospered under their combined efforts. They had added chickens and goats to their livestock, expanded the vegetable garden, and begun selling excess produce in town. Yates had even started breaking horses for neighboring ranches, developing a reputation for his gentle but effective methods. Their happiness was shadowed only by the lingering uncertainty of Marcus's legal claim and the status of their relationship. Though they lived as a family in private, in public they maintained a careful distance, aware of the potential for scandal. The news, when it came, arrived with the first snowfall. A letter from the territorial court, delivered by a neighbor returning from town, officially recognized Marcus Zimmerman's abandonment of his homestead claim and his wife. The divorce was granted on grounds of desertion, and Jenna was awarded sole ownership of the property. "It's done," she whispered, reading the letter for the third time as if afraid the words might change. "I'm free." Yates, who had been pacing the cabin as she read, stopped and knelt before her chair. "Truly free," she nodded, tears of relief filling her eyes. "Free to make my own choices." "Free to—" She couldn't finish the sentence, overcome with emotion. "Jenna Zimmerman," Yates said, taking her hands in his. "I've loved you since that stormy night when Samuel came into the world. I've loved watching you mother him, work this land, face every challenge with courage. I want to spend the rest of my days at your side if you'll have me." "Is this a proposal, Mr. Everett?" she asked, a smile breaking through her tears. "The most important one I'll ever make." He reached into his pocket and produced a simple gold band. "Had this made in town last month. Been carrying it, waiting for this day." Jenna looked at the ring, then at the man before her, the man who had delivered her son, who had stayed when another had fled, who had helped her build a life she had only dreamed of. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates Everett." Their wedding took place on Christmas Day, 1877, in the small church in Helena. Samuel, now walking confidently and chattering in his own language, served as ring-bearer, carried down the aisle by Martha Wilson. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful, witnessed by the neighbors who had become friends and supported their unconventional family. "I promise to love you and Samuel all the days of my life," Yates vowed, his voice steady as he placed the ring on Jenna's finger. "To work beside you, to build our dreams together, to be the husband and father you both deserve." "I promise to love you with all my heart," Jenna responded, tears glistening in her eyes. "To be your partner in all things, to create a home filled with love and laughter. To remember always that you are the blessing that came from my darkest hour." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife with a broad smile, clearly pleased to officially unite a couple that the community had long considered married in all but name. The celebration afterward filled their homestead with music, food, and friendship well into the night. Later, after the guests had departed and Samuel slept soundly in his room, no longer a corner of the cabin but a proper bedroom Yates had built the previous summer, they stood on the porch, wrapped in a quilt against the winter chill, looking out at the moonlit landscape. "Mrs. Everett," Yates said softly, testing the name. "I like the sound of that," Jenna replied, leaning into his embrace. "I never thought I'd find this," he confessed. "After the war, after losing my family, I thought I was meant to be alone, just passing through other people's lives. And now I know I was just making my way to you, to Samuel, to this place that finally feels like home." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The harsh Montana climate tested their resolve with droughts, blizzards, and the occasional grasshopper plague. But the foundation they had built, both in their relationship and their homestead, proved resilient. Samuel grew from a toddler to a boy with his mother's quick mind and his adoptive father's calm steadiness. When he was 4, Jenna gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, followed 2 years later by twin boys, James and William. Their family of 6 filled the expanded cabin with noise, energy, and love. The homestead prospered. Yates's skill with horses evolved into a successful breeding operation, while Jenna's garden experiments resulted in hardier vegetables that thrived in the Montana soil. They built a proper school for their children and others in the area, with Jenna often serving as teacher during winter months when travel to town was difficult. On Samuel's 10th birthday, Yates took him riding along the boundaries of their property, now expanded to include adjacent parcels they had gradually acquired. "Your mother built all this," Yates told him as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. "She had the vision and the courage when others doubted. But you helped," Samuel pointed out. "Ma says she couldn't have done it without you." Yates smiled at the boy who, though not his by blood, was so completely his son in heart. "We built it together. That's the secret, Sam. Finding someone who shares your dreams, who stands beside you through the hard times. Like when you delivered me during the storm." "Your mother told you that story," Samuel nodded. "Every year on my birthday. She says it was the night that changed everything." Yates considered this as they rode back toward home, where Jenna would be waiting with the other children and the traditional birthday dinner. "She's right," he said finally. "That night changed my life too. I was just passing through with no destination in mind. And then there was your mother and you, and suddenly I had somewhere I needed to be." "I'm glad you stayed," Samuel said simply. "Me too, son. Every single day." As they approached the homestead, Yates could see Jenna on the porch, little Elizabeth on her hip and the twins playing at her feet. The sight still took his breath away, even after all these years. In town, they were now respected members of the community. Yates served on the school board, while Jenna had organized a lending library that operated out of the general store. Their unconventional beginning had long since been forgotten or romanticized into a frontier love story that people enjoyed retelling. Only they knew the full truth, the fear and uncertainty of that stormy night, the gradual building of trust, the leap of faith they had taken together. Only they understood how close they had come to never finding each other at all. In the spring of Samuel's 12th year, an unexpected visitor arrived at their homestead. Jenna was in the garden with Elizabeth when she heard a horse approaching. Looking up, she saw a gaunt, weathered man she barely recognized. "Marcus," she said, the name feeling foreign on her lips after so many years. He dismounted slowly, his movements those of a much older man, though he was only in his 40s. "Jenna," he acknowledged, "you're looking well." She straightened, brushing soil from her hands. "What brings you here, passing through?" "Heard in town about the Everett place, the horses, the crops. They said Mrs. Everett used to be Mrs. Zimmerman." His eyes drifted to Elizabeth, who was watching the stranger curiously. "This one's not mine, I take it." "No, Elizabeth is Yates's daughter." Jenna kept her voice neutral. "As are Samuel and the twins, in every way that matters." Marcus nodded, something like regret flickering across his face. "I figured as much. The boys in town speak highly of your husband. Seems he's made something of this place." "We both have," Jenna corrected firmly. "It was never the land that was the problem, Marcus." He accepted this with a rueful nod. "I wasn't cut out for it, for any of it." His gaze drifted to the prosperous homestead, the solid barn, the thriving fields, the expanded cabin. "Looks like you found someone who was." "What do you want, Marcus?" Jenna asked, aware of Elizabeth pressing against her skirts, sensing tension. "Nothing you can give me," he replied with unexpected honesty. "Just wanted to see it once, the life I walked away from." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "Brought this. Figured your boy might want it someday. It's a formal acknowledgement that I have no claim on him." Had it drawn up proper in Denver. Jenna took the document, surprised by the gesture. Doesn't make up for anything, Marcus continued. Just seemed the right thing to do. The sound of approaching hoofbeats announced Yates's return from town with Samuel and the twins. Jenna watched as Marcus stiffened slightly at the sight of the man who had replaced him. Yates pulled his horse to a stop, his expression carefully neutral as he recognized the visitor. "Zimmerman," he said with a nod. "Everett." Marcus returned the nod. "You've done well here." "We have," Yates agreed, dismounting and moving to stand beside Jenna. The boys remained on their horses, watching with curiosity. An awkward silence fell, broken by Marcus. "I should be on my way. Just wanted to deliver that paper and see that things worked out as they should." He mounted his horse with effort. "You have a fine family, Mrs. Everett," he said, using her married name deliberately. "Finer than I could have given you." With that, he turned his horse and rode away, a solitary figure against the vast Montana landscape. "Are you all right?" Yates asked quietly when Marcus was out of earshot. Jenna looked up at her husband, the man who had delivered her firstborn, who had stayed when another had fled, who had built a life with her beyond anything she could have imagined that stormy night. "Yes," she said with complete truthfulness. "I have everything I could ever want right here." That night, after the children were asleep, Jenna and Yates sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars emerge in the clear Montana sky. "Seeing him again," Yates began carefully, "did it stir up old feelings?" Jenna considered the question. "Not the kind you might worry about," she assured him, "just reflections on how life turns. If he hadn't left that night, if you hadn't come along when you did, we'd have found each other somehow," Yates said with quiet certainty. "Maybe not in the same way, but some paths are meant to cross." Jenna smiled at his unexpected romanticism. "When did you know," she asked, "that this was more than just helping a woman in distress?" "The moment you looked at Samuel for the first time," he admitted. "There was such love in your eyes, such strength. I remember thinking that any man who could walk away from that didn't deserve it in the first place." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the wedding band he'd placed there years ago. "And that I'd be the luckiest man alive if I could be part of it." "You've been part of it from the very beginning," Jenna said softly. "You delivered him into this world. You named him, remember?" Yates smiled at the memory. "You were exhausted, said you couldn't think straight. Asked me to suggest something. And you said Samuel after your father. Seemed right somehow, connecting him to family, even if not by blood." Jenna leaned against his shoulder, content in the quiet moment. "Do you ever wonder about the coincidence that you happened to be passing by during that storm at exactly the moment I needed someone?" Yates was quiet for a long moment. "I don't believe it was coincidence," he said finally. "I was lost after the war, after losing my family, just drifting without purpose. That storm drove me to your door, but something else, call it fate or providence, kept me here. And you've never regretted staying, taking on another man's responsibilities?" "Never," he said firmly. "From the moment I held Samuel, still wet and squalling, I knew I was where I belonged. When you asked me to stay, to be your partner in this place, it wasn't a decision at all. It was coming home." The years continued to pass, bringing changes to their family and the growing town of Helena. Samuel, at 18, left for college in Denver with his father's blessing and his mother's tearful pride. Elizabeth blossomed into a young woman with her mother's determination and beauty. The twins, James and William, worked the homestead alongside their parents, adding their own improvements and innovations. On the 20th anniversary of Samuel's birth and of their meeting, Yates surprised Jenna with a gift. He led her, blindfolded, from their cabin to a spot on the property she didn't immediately recognize. "You can look now," he said, removing the blindfold. Jenna gasped at the sight before her. A small cabin, newly built, stood in a grove of trees overlooking the creek. It was a perfect replica of their original cabin, the one-room structure where they had met, where Samuel had been born, where their life together had begun. "Yates," she breathed. "It's exactly the same." "Not inside," he said, leading her through the door. "I took some liberties." The interior was cozy and thoughtfully appointed: a comfortable bed, a small table by the window, a rocking chair before the hearth. On the mantel stood framed drawings of their children at various ages, done by Elizabeth, who had inherited her father's artistic talent. "This is just for us," Yates explained. "A place to remember where we started, a place to be alone sometimes, now that the children are grown or growing." Tears filled Jenna's eyes as she turned to her husband. At 50, Yates was still strong, though his sandy hair had silvered at the temples and lines had deepened around his eyes. To her, he was more handsome than ever, the years having added character to the face she loved above all others. 20 years, she marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you knocked on my door during that storm." "Best decision I ever made," he said, drawing her into his arms. "Seeking shelter with you." Jenna rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady heartbeat that had become the rhythm of her life. "We've built something wonderful, haven't we? Something that will last." "We have," Yates agreed, "and we're not finished yet, not by a long shot." That night, in the cabin that honored their beginnings, they made love with the tenderness of long-married partners who still discovered new depths to their connection. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, they spoke of the future, of grandchildren yet to come, of new ventures for the homestead, of dreams still unfolding. "I never thanked him," Jenna said suddenly. "Who?" Yates asked, stroking her hair. "Marcus, for leaving. If he hadn't abandoned me that night, you and I might never have found each other." Yates considered this. Some men run from responsibility, others run toward it. He made his choice and I made mine. He kissed her forehead gently. "And every day since, I've chosen you, Jenna, every single day." "As I've chosen you," she whispered. "The cowboy who delivered my baby and stayed forever." Outside, the Montana sky spread vast and star-filled above their land, the homestead that had grown from struggling outpost to thriving family enterprise. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they rested in the certainty of a love that had begun in crisis, but had endured through joy and sorrow, abundance and hardship, always growing stronger with each passing year. Their story, which had started with abandonment and a fortuitous storm, had become a testament to the power of choosing love, day after day, and building a life of purpose together. It was not the end they had envisioned when they began their separate journeys west, but it was infinitely better than anything they could have planned. And in the years to come, long after they were gone, the story would be retold by their children and grandchildren, the legend of the cowboy who had appeared on a stormy night to deliver a child, and had stayed to create a legacy of love that would endure for generations.